Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt and this is Cutting Through Matrix on the 25th of December 2019. And as they all say, doesn't time fly, eh? And it does. It's getting faster and faster all the time. And for many of us, and for me for sure, it's like living through, as I say, Groundhog Day over and over, because we're living through such an amazingly scripted agenda with like a big business plan, like I've always said, step by step by step, where things have to be accomplished along the road by that certain dates, just like a huge big business plan. And that's what we're living through. And a lot of it becomes boring because there are no surprises. There really are no surprises. When you realize you truly, this is a good time to talk about Christmas and so on, and what's happening, because literally the whole culture of the West is to be utterly destroyed. I hope you understand that. And it's a complete war. It's total war. For those who think that things just happen by themselves, by accident, the accidental view of history, not at all. It's so well orchestrated and so well formulated and organized and planned and implemented with literally an army of people across the world, all connected, working together to bring it all into being with big foundations, with money backing them and so on and so on. And we're living through a system where they give you the leaders. I mean, back in the 90s when I came out and talked about what was going on, I only came out, I said, because I couldn't believe that the public, that even in a country like America, the last bastion for at that time free speech, had stations there. There were alternate stations, the radio stations, but they were still navel-gazing. They didn't realize that there were huge, big agendas across the whole planet, all coordinating the thing together for globalism. And so I came out then thinking, I better tell these people. What they're seeing is only the surface of the thing. They don't realize how intensively, intricately organized this is. It's incredible. But again, it's published works too from a lot of the big players in the past and in the present that let you know what they're doing and where they're taking it and all the rest of it. If you want to believe their reasons for it, it's up to you. But the fact is, during World War II and afterwards, certain organizations were given, or give themselves the power, put it that way perhaps, to reshape the West and the world and rebuild its whole culture. And it meant, and they were rather vocal about it, they hated Christianity. And they wanted to eliminate the past completely for the West, very much along the same way as year zero would be for the communists. Even going back to the French Revolution, where they talked about a new calendar, and they tried with different. I think it's 10 days to their week or something. The way they worked it out initially, but it kind of fell apart. But they never stopped, and of course Cambodia was the same in year zero. So the whole idea is to remake a history starting from its proper place, where they themselves who've conquered you are on top and managing it all in a properly efficient, technocratic way, you see. But it's in your face today. It truly is in your face, as they go in for the kill to stop any last vestige of free speech, and making it illegal, actually, which is a terrifying thing about it. To even ask questions. And if you can't ask questions, then next generation's gone, if they can't ask questions. And they're under tyranny, of course, then. But I was looking through, and I've looked through, every year I look through especially since this incredibly deceptive, massive, prolonged Middle Eastern, especially Middle Eastern war that's on the go, for reasons, of course, we should never tell you the truth. To see that the West financed huge armies from Al-Qaeda and in different guises of it all, ISIS and ISIL and yada, yada, yada. It's all the same group, basically, funded by the West. I remember doing the shows on it from, again, the newspaper, papers in London and so on. They'd print it. We're supplying them with arms. We're training these supposed freedom fighters, as they pretended that Syria, for instance, had a civil war on the go. But it was all incomers financed from the West and from the US and Britain and so on, and their tax money was funding it all. And they would land all their equipment for carrying on the war in Qatar and distribute the arms and so on from there. So this went on for years and years, and it's still on the go, by the way. It hasn't stopped. And the same agenda was published in the 1990s with the PNAC group, with all the list on it. So it's the same thing on the go, on the go, on the go. But during all that time, do you realize that every Christmas there's less and less Christians, not just because in the West they're getting atheized. In the Middle East they were getting slaughtered with all ancient churches, some of the first churches in Christendom, totally destroyed and wrecked and people slaughtered. And I can remember being in communication with some people in some of those churches over there that were getting done in with armaments from the West. There was nowhere for them to turn to. No one would listen to them for help. They were completely, not just expendable, but I think that's part of the eradication process. There's no doubt about it. And there's other players in the Middle East too, as we all know, that wanted this to happen as well, and still do. But you had all these people that were, well, the ones that were left getting homeless, trying to get into the West, and they couldn't get help. They couldn't get help to get in. As soon as they mentioned they were Christian, and different branches of Christianity from that area, and Coptic and so on, boom, that was it. The doors shut on them in the West. Because this is, you talk about genocide. We're living through genocide. And the governments are all complicit because your governments have got nothing to do at all with what you think they're there for. Nothing at all. The people who rule you, you don't even see them most of the time. Never mind this farce of voting. It's interesting that Boris Johnson got in because he's all for this hands across the water idea of this alliance. They'll get together, just like Tony Blair's day, and retake different countries and bomb them out of existence that's left standing across the Middle East. That's the agenda, and it's not going to back off, folks. It can only back off if enough light was truly shone on it. I don't think that's going to happen. Everything's so completely taken over, you understand. And in fact, there'll be a massive backlash if you mention any truths today. That's so sad. But yeah, people are dying and getting slaughtered and annihilated. People who literally have kept themselves to themselves. They're not peddling drugs across the planet. They're family people with ancient traditions going back. And let's be honest, I don't see why everybody else that's got ancient traditions can't survive here. And also tells you, though, there's a plan at the very, very top to eradicate it. So you'll see this, unfortunately, getting worse. It's not going to get better in the West as well. We can see totalitarian elements grabbing power for themselves and governments going along with it to shut down free speech altogether. It's so sad. As I say, especially in America, that was the hope for a lot of places in the world, because for years ago, when I came out too, they had lots of alternate radio stations. There was a kind of America First at the time, but they were navel gazing. I came out and literally filled in the global agenda, and it did help change the way that it was approached, because a lot of them out there today, actually, maybe I wouldn't say all, but not far from it, literally are intelligence agencies behind them running the show. If you hadn't figured it out, it might not be even, well, it doesn't matter. You see, you don't have a country if you live in it today. You don't have it. Most folk will never figure out that what runs their country is not for them. Really. And there's a bigger agenda on the go. And we're living through total war. But as I say, America used to be the hope, because it was the only one that had written into any kind of constitution that you had the right to free speech. And no one, and that means no one, underline no one, could take that away from you. And I remember Bill Cooper years ago, one of the guys that kept up on what was happening, and he had his own show for years. And he wasn't perfect either. No one's perfect. We're all human. He did get killed for coming out and talking. And he knew he would be killed eventually too. And they did. They sent at least two SWAT teams up to his home to assassinate him, try to lure him outside, and then shot him down as they said he was trying to run away on his own land, right? And try to get into his own house. And they said he ran. The man had one leg. For those who don't know, the other one was artificial. But he was assassinated, and at that time it was evident to many, in fact, that government had taken a different approach to the supposed tolerance issue, tolerance of different factions and Christian sects and all the rest of it. And they made a big deal too about a big show to the public. When you see a show well publicized, it's meant to cast a spell, and there's an intent behind it. And when they did the Waco siege, as they called it, where they could have gotten the character, the rafter that ran this group, he was the head of this group, that was registered, by the way, as a religion. And I don't care what you think of it. The fact is, if they go for one branch of anything or in one form of any kind of religion, eventually they'll work round to you too. You better start thinking about that. And they made a big show, and they went in with heavily trained, and for the purpose, SWAT teams, like an army raid, in fact. And they came out in shooting because when the guy came to the door, folk came to the door initially, the feds just opened up. And that was on video at the time. But the whole thing was to show you them wiping out people who had rights. They stood up for rights and this silly thing called American rights and freedoms and constitutions and Bill of Rights and so on. And it was such a nuisance, you say. It was time you started to learn that you really don't have them. And they wiped the people out there, and they burned a lot of them alive too. A very, very high Masonic occultic show. And they bowed. You saw all the different fire. I call it, well, they're not even mercenaries. Sometimes mercenaries have a code of honor even, but these characters are just scum. That's all you can call them. Which governments often recruit in times of tyranny to be used against the public. And you see them bowing towards the flames in a big circle as the night wore on, and then burned all the people and children as well. And that was a message to the public that no, you don't have these rights and freedoms anymore, yada, yada, yada. And they'd already set up other groups too before and wiped them out as well with assassination squads. Well known at the time, and at least at the time, again, American radio had different. It wasn't a monopoly today for a supposed patriot radio. You had a lot of real independent groups who were now not out for money or backed by big bucks and big people, or even not backed by the intelligence agencies. Some of them were, but there were still at that time at least some that were still independent and trying to really follow their own consciences and do the right thing and tell the public what was going on. But as I say, that was then. That was in the 90s, and I've watched the total erosion by, again, intelligence agencies. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it, folks. And remember, in intelligence, that the idea with counterintelligence and so on is to create cognitive dissonance by giving you groups that all seem to oppose each other, but eventually they'll even have each other on as they bring all their followers into one big herd and spin it around for you and so on, and bring you back into the con game of politics. At one time, the people were savvy enough to never trust politicians, any politician. And believe you me, you're going to get no political messiahs ever. And I watched it with Trump getting put in, and I knew darn well, because of so much around Trump, it was not for the American people. But they did a good spin on it. It was well financed and so on. And the whole idea was if he got the wars going again in the Middle East and finished all of them off, Syria and the rest of them, in Iran, then he'd be a big hero again. But it's been a bit of a hold up in that for a while, so he's been getting bad press. But if he gets the wars going, they'll be all happy again, and you'll suddenly see him praised, and he'll be given again more titles, ancient titles, more ancient titles from the ones he's already been given, to getting it all going. But the thing is, we're living through amazing times of persecution, and I'll put up some of the links of for those who don't know that a lot of ancient Christian groups, not rich either, have been slaughtered intentionally, folks, by paid mercenaries by the West. And sometimes not just for the West either. We know that. And persecution is definitely rearing its awfully ugly head. Because once it gets going in the West and so-called wealthier countries, you'll see terrible things like what happened during the Bolshevik era and after that too, into the communist era, as they want to call it, the Stalinist era. You'll just get disappeared people all the time. That's a nuisance, because the messages now, you've got to be one of the herd. If you're not a ruler, you see, in the ruling group, then you've got to be one of the herd and just be like one mass mind, and all the same thoughts, same talk. Everything's been brainwashed until you just parrot it off, and then you're a good little citizen. That's what they want. Believe you me, because you can smell it coming. You can smell it coming across the West. And there's no doubt whatsoever as to who the fake parties that you have in all the countries, who they're serving. Tremendous evil is no doubt, absolutely no doubt at work today. It's in your face. You smell it coming. You smell the same techniques that were used before to implement mass extinctions, in fact. And you can see the hate, the true hate is often from the ones who claim they're being hated. The true hate are the ones in power who've got this ability to promote their laws, agendas, and so on. In a wild fanaticism, in fact, of self-righteousness as they pick out their targets and want to eliminate them. Using, of course, front people called police, no doubt, or domestic militaries, or whatever you want to call them, and do the job for them. It really, really is that bad. But we're living under total war. This is total war. When, as I say, many of the groups in the past came out and published stacks of books, especially in America, when they moved to America, a lot of them, lots of books on the agenda, what they wanted to happen, and so on. And there's no doubt about it that the entire culture, everything that made you work, made you strong and made it workable, had to be completely and utterly destroyed. That means complete family unit, sexual morality, everything had to be utterly put into, well, even Adorno mentioned it too. He said that right down to necrophilia. That wouldn't be enough then. This would have to get promoted, all this terrible stuff that you're seeing today, to eliminate anything of the past, so the past couldn't reconstruct itself, you see, to make you strong again. You understand, what they're saying is that everything that gave you life and meaning had to be eradicated. Meaning. That's why they're always telling you about new truths. They give you new truths and new realities, you see. And their realities, as they keep changing it to utterly destroy your mind and logic, is that there's no objective reality. Everything is subjective. Let's all have our own opinions and everything, and it's all relative, etc., etc. But of course there's objective reality. Look around you, see what's been destroyed, find out why. It's not hard to find, and you can see where it's all supposed to go. Really. And it's very difficult for people in this day and age, very, very difficult for them to admit to themselves, or even what they see especially, when they see that there are people who utterly, groups well organized, heavily financed groups, who utterly hate them with a pathological loathing. And they're out there, and they exist, they're in powerful places. So, as I say, this is not a happy Christmas message that everyone's going to be wonderful. In the 90s, I said that on some shows I was on. I said, I won't be the cheerleaders for the public. The public, you have to come to, you can't hang on to any kind of freedom if you're going to keep silent about it. It's going to get lost and chipped away. I mean, so you can't be a cheerleader for the public. This idea that others must do your work for you, you forget it, folks. Everyone who says, the government wouldn't do this and government wouldn't do that, somebody would stop them, or somebody would do something about it. How many times well, come on, these people aren't going to do anything for themselves. Never, ever. They'll all want others to do it for them and cheer them along the way. But if just like the messiahs of the past, if they don't accomplish what the people want on an earthly plane, they'll go for the people that fail to do it for them, because they always know what they want leaders to do. And this is Christmas, as I say. What's left of it? What's left of it? And it's not a matter, you see, you understand, this isn't a matter of just belief or atheism or agnosticism. the primal cohesive factor in the West's cultures, doesn't matter what country, was Christianity. The religion is one of the primal glues of societies that call themselves civilized in the West. And it gave you your basic morality that made you strong and made you survive. Basic morality. It stopped you from ripping each other off and stealing and doing it and blah, blah, and blah. You had basic commandments that made things, it doesn't matter if you didn't fulfill them perfectly. The fact is it forced you to think about things and stopped a lot of folk from being kind of following the psychopaths, you might say. But when you think of all the generations going way, way back for centuries and centuries and centuries, down through Canada, the US, other countries, and back all the way back to Europe and so on, for right back to centuries ago, that was all you're the result of all of that for what they accomplished. And let's forget the class system. The folk at the bottom built everything. Sure, they did. And they died, but they passed some knowledge on to each generation, and all the peoples worked to bring us to where we eventually got to, and then you get more coming in, different folk coming, wanting to destroy the whole system completely, because they know better, and of course they should rule it instead, shouldn't they? Isn't that what it's all about? Isn't it? Of course it is. But Christianity, and it doesn't matter about the atheists either. The Christmas gave you all something that bound you together. It's a bonding process of your culture, is tradition. If you toss all your traditions out the window, believe you me, just like the communists did, they'll give you new traditions, that very, very glum, dour traditions, believe you me. Because there's no spirit in it. You need the spirit. And I was thinking today too of even the songs that you'd hear at Christmas, not just the carols and all that, but the actual hymnals and so on. I might put up a couple of links, in fact, for anybody who wants to see them. There's one that was done in Berlin in about 1990, I think it was. And it's traditional old hymn songs and for Christmas. They have excellent orchestras there too, and choirs and singers. But they also, about 10, 15 minutes into it, you'll see they bring an Eastern Orthodox Christian group in of friars. And you hear them singing, and it's just beautiful, Russian-type harmony, beautiful harmonies. And again, these religions, we had tough times for thousands of years. The planet is not a happy place to be on when you're fighting, battling nature to survive. I hope you understand that. The groups that want to take you down today, want to take away your heating and your food and everything. Think about it, folks. We're here today because folks struggle for centuries and centuries and centuries and social levels too, to get to a stage where we could all get heating and food, etc., etc. The ones at the top hate that because, my goodness, like H.G. Wells says, we breed. Oh, we breed, for goodness sake. If you feed them and you heat them, well, they breed, eh? They, I always said they. Oh. I hope you realize that you're in a very hostile situation with very well-organized groups across the planet taking over that you don't vote for, as I've said so many times before. You don't vote for them, and most folk won't even know they exist, or what they are, who they are, or even where they are. And they're all connected through internet, of course, and their organizations, and the massive paychecks you get from these big foundations that the non-governmental organizations are funded from. Massive. They have retirement benefits like any CEOs would have for these NGO leaders. When you see these young folk getting put across the world right now, just appearing in their 30s there, eh? Mainly women at the moment, that's the end thing. But from the right backgrounds. Look at Finland's a good one too. When the latest Finn got in, this young woman who came from the right background, if you read her bio, that's how she was, partly how she was selected. But then you'll see too, I think the 4 other parties are all led by women now too. Well, you have to go into the organizations that's set up to bring and create future leaders, folks. They didn't just appear on the scene by them. They were picked at school, for goodness sake, often junior school, and groomed for positions of leadership. That's what Common Purpose in England was about. One organisation to create leaders for the European Union for different countries. Well, you're seeing them emerge now. And they're presented as just young, clever people. No, they're not. They're picked and groomed and trained into international socialism to obey a superior group, you see, above them. And beneath them, they see you as utterly inferior. A herd. But they're not appearing out of nowhere. And they have thousands of these folks sitting in the wing across the planet. Because life today is incredibly deceptive. And everything you look at is not just false information or fake news, as they call it. It's slanted news or slightly altered realities, and so that's how it's done all the time. Or bits of stories. As I say, they won't come out and tell you the backgrounds of these young folk. They're just appearing there and getting picked up by left-wing parties. No, they were picked and groomed from childhood. Which is rather ominous, because such people will be hard to break out of the conditioning if they ever go into the mass genocide mode that's happened in history before. I hope you understand that. I hope you really understand that. You're not dealing here with the old idea, let's pretend we're just happy parties all conflicted and arguing with each other. No, but they're way beyond that stage. Long ago. And the same agendas continue. But I looked at Boris Johnson there in England, and the guy who's bought and paid for by the City of London and presented in front of the public as, again, another British saviour. It won't happen. And already, it's so amazing to watch Trump and him at the moment. Both off to see the troops somewhere and do their serving. Boris did his serving. He loves publicity, but they all do, don't they? As they dish out some food to some troops in one of the countries that perhaps they shouldn't even be in. You can see them getting the armies ready on board together for the next launch of the next big war that's to happen. You understand? And that's tragic. That's part of the reason we're so bankrupt too, mind you. And being bankrupt will work along just well, because the ones who rule us all will have a new system set up when they bankrupt us all in the new global system, totally electronic, of course, along the lines of Bertrand Russell, as mentioned before, with his credit system. It works perfectly together in a social credit system, you see. So I think people should not panic about anything, be very aware of what's going on, and be very careful about following people. You remember, because I do know how a lot of the movement was taken over, and they always put up people there that all part of the same stuff as the true ones, with the same. In fact, they'll take your information lock, stock, and barrel, and just present it as their own. But then they'll tack on their own spin. Vote for this person; they're wonderful, or whatever. Or they love to have pizzas with common people, so vote for them. That nonsense, you see. And they're fronts, folks. They're fronts for bigger. They're actually fronts for the big organisations that run the world and are taking us down the merry path right now. Truly. And you can't stop people listening, of course, because if you get rat poisoning out there, 5% of what's in that corn is poison. The 95% must be real corn. And that's how the stuff is presented to the public, or else you'd all turn off, right? Wouldn't you? I'd hope so. And so when you see the two of the alliance, part of the Five Eyes Alliance, get together with others too, and shake hands and play to the troops, there definitely will be more wars coming up. Because the list has to be completed, as I say, and more than the list. Like Carl Quigley said that war is meant also to introduce social change, planned socialist change, so that the correct folk can run the world and run you and your countries, because war opens up the venues for them to step in and fill the voids implement a big plan, of course. So all sides in a conflict are changed, you see. It's the lie of preserving your system is just that, it's a lie. You don't go to war to preserve it, you go to get conquered as well as the ones you're going to conquer by other folk behind the scenes. That's how it is. But anyway, for getting back to the Christian at Christmas time and so on, it gave us a cultures that worked to an extent better than other cultures, there's no doubt about that. And it gave us the ability to reflect on ourselves. It forced us to reflect on ourselves, which kept a form of peace too sometimes. And it helped people go through terrible, terrible persecutions down through the eons. And when you hear even one of the links I put up, as I say, to the Berlin Christmas concert, really, you'll hear the Eastern Orthodox guys come in, and the Eastern Orthodox Church or Russian Orthodox, you wouldn't believe what they suffered with utter abject cruelty. I've heard some of the guys talk about what happened to them. It's beyond just torture, and the hatred cannot be expressed to you by those who really hate this thing called Christianity. And remember, the churches there really did cater to the ordinary folk, and they were part of the communities and so on. And it got them through. And there again, you hear them at the end of the Soviet era, the last year really, singing. And the feeling behind it, what they're saying, is just astonishing. That's what the whole thing's about, is touching something called spirit and soul in you. It doesn't matter what other religions people are into. They can't help but be stunned by it and mesmerized when they hear this kind of singing put out by people who truly believe. And you need that sometimes to get you through life when things aren't going well. And for most folk today, since the whole of our system and civilization is completely under the last vestiges of attack, to be literally a planned, organized, intelligent attack, it's the only thing sometimes that gets them through, and it gives them ability to stand up. That's why it's so terrible. They always want to destroy religion. It makes folk stand together and stand up to tyrants. And that's the last thing that they want when they got to put the last few of the boots into you might say. So for the folk out there who've been listening for years, don't be depressed about things. It's going to be tough and terrible. But as long as you have each other and you truly have a faith, you could have a faith that rises above all the baseness of the corrupt and the evil people out there, then it can help you come through terrible times. There's no doubt about it. So I wish everybody a good Merry Christmas when again we see another year of further decay and destruction planned for us all, and more wars, etc. But we've got to always stick together and don't be fooled by the front people who are put out there for you to follow, and who lead you up the garden path. And a lot of these fake Christian preachers that are multi-millionaires and maybe some multi-billionaires that obviously don't work for you in America. They do not, folks. And why America has been carefully linked to wars in the Middle East is rather astonishing to outsiders. It's very cleverly done. But the fact is, you've got to really look at who's using you and stop being used, and stop falling for this election time Christianity. If they can't say it all year round, forget it. So, and forget them too. But don't fall for the voting, and suddenly they're all the ones who are pushing the same agenda, all the front people, the fake fronts you got there, are suddenly Christians again. Just look at what they do. Listen to what they've said before, and tell me they're Christian, folks. So, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. That's how it should be for all of us. So anyway, for all those people out there, as I say, I won't keep it stay too long, so I'm going to get this up on site. And I can't play anything, unfortunately, for myself, because the arthritis bouts, my hands are awful. And my thumb, especially on my right hand, is like a beacon. I could probably light up a room in the darkness. It's so red and it's swollen. And it's unfortunate, but maybe eventually I can get the swelling down and eventually play something again before while I'm still alive and kicking, put it that way, and able to do so. So I really wish you all out there, and I mean all of you, because I get to know everybody with their emails and so on over the years, and the trials and tribulations that are human, but we'll all go through them. And it brings us all together as humans, as going through the realities of life. So I wish you all the best, and have a good, safe and pleasant Christmas time.